Hey everyone, welcome back to Not Another SEO Guru. Thank you for joining me today. So this video is kind of by popular demand. I had a good response to the previous video talking about the 5 most common mistakes that I encounter regarding implementation and schema markup. Uh, these are going to go deeper into more 5 advanced JSON-LD schema markup mistakes in SEO. So one thing to keep in mind is as I go through these next 5, this is going to be a bigger video where I'm going to go into some more detail, give you some coding examples and things like that. Um, but keep one thing in mind in so far as I'm still consider the implementations I show you in the coding examples very, very basic. This is just to illustrate the concepts. As you know, we go very, very deeply into our schema implementations and methodologies and break a lot of rules, but for very specific, precise reasons and understanding why we're doing so inside things like our mastermind. So, with that being said, let's jump into the next 5 common mistakes. Okay, so just to recap really quickly in our last video, we covered these first 5. So one was incorrect schema type being used on pages. The second was placeholder or generic schema. Number 3 was duplicate schemas. Number 4 was marking up data that does not exist. And number 5 is coding errors and warnings. So if you haven't seen that video, please go back and watch that. It'll be a good preface to what we're going to talk about today. So let's dive deeper and go into some more fun stuff. All right, so today we're going to talk about the next more advanced 5 schema issues to avoid. So number 6, overloading pages with too many schema types. Number 7 is neglecting schema updates with site changes. Very, very common. Number 8 is misuse of custom or uncommon properties. Now, I will put a star beside number 8 because if you know me or if you have been exposed to my training or just my methodologies, um, we use custom properties all the time, but you use it in a very specific way. And I'm going to do a very separate, specific, precise video on this exact topic, showing you how this actually is implemented and how you can do it correctly. It's very, very powerful. But you have to know what you're doing. You have to do it correctly and understand why you're putting things in your templates and what the expected outcome of doing so actually is. So number 9, improper nesting and hierarchy of schemas. That's something I run into an awful lot. Often what you'll find when you do that is you'll either omit some of the rendering of the template, so it'll still pass with 0 errors and 0 warnings, but there will be a whole bunch of information missing that's completely disregarded because it was improperly structured. Or, in the worst case scenario, it'll generate an error, and then you have to resolve that before you proceed. And number 10 is ignoring structured data quality testing and optimization. So how can we make our implementations more efficient? How can we make those more concise and more focused so that the efficiency, when we talk about things like crawl budget, that has a small part to play in there, but really it's an efficiency and precision play that I'm mostly going after with number 10. Okay, so let's go into each of these in more detail. And for each section, I have a coding example to show you the before and after to give you more information in terms of exactly what we're talking about here. So mistake number 6 is overloading pages with too many schema types. So sometimes SEOs try to include as many schema types as possible on a single page. I'm guilty of this all the time, but again, I'm doing this for very specific reasons, and that's not the scope of today's video. But in general, too many schema types on a single page, like things like adding product, FAQ, review, event, sometimes even video, audio, web page, um, QA page. Uh, can go on and on, right? Um, it may seem that more schema equals more visibility, but actually this can serve to dilute the page's focus. And this is where you need to have either the training or the experience, or ideally both, to understand when it's okay to do those types of things, when it's okay to push. But in general, as a best practice, we want to keep things focused and simple. So imagine, for instance, like a product page with both FAQ and review schema. If overloaded, search engines might struggle to decide which type of rich snippet to display, or worse, not show any at all. And the not showing any at all is actually more common than you might realize. So the SEO impact of this, well, overloaded schema markup can create a confusing mix of signals, leading search engines to misinterpret the primary purpose of your page. This can affect your rankings and prevent rich results. The solution, and remember, keep this whole thing in mind as we're going through the video, that this is considered a basic demonstration and implementation. This is a conceptual demonstration. In our actual implementation in our advanced group, we do things a little differently, but we still adhere to a lot of these principles. So it's not like I'm telling you one thing and doing the other, where this isn't relevant. Um, in some cases, I am doing the other, but again, it's because I'm trying to achieve a very specific situation. So I won't mention that again because I think I've beaten that to death. So the solution in this case is limit your use of schema types to what is strictly relevant to the main purpose of the page. If it's a product page, focus on product schema. And if there are FAQs, consider linking to a dedicated FAQ page. Now, FAQ can also play into things like people also ask, um, different things that are supporting a particular query that gets a lot of traffic. So I'm thinking in terms of things like Reddit, Quora, those types of queries, where you can capitalize on some of that information and then begin to craft that in a more local way so that you can start achieving those rich snippet results for your specific client based on very popular questions that are being asked in not only the local marketplace, but in the general categorical bucket, if you will, in the larger scheme of things. But um, that's where the dedicated page can sometimes be very useful. But keep the structured data straightforward and aligned with the page's intent. And the intent is really the key here. So here's an example. I'm sorry this is a little bit small, just because there's a lot here. But you can see we have like this is a very, very, very basic example. This is not something I would actually put on the page in this form. My templates are much more robust, but as a demonstration, this is it. Okay, so we have product, we have review, we have FAQ page, and we have event. So that's a lot of stuffing that we typically do not need, with an asterisk. And I don't know why that keeps coming up that way. There we go. So here's the example of making this more focused. So we removed the FAQ and the event schema. We streamlined the focus on the product schema, aligning the structured data with the primary purpose of the page. Okay, so before, after. Okay, so mistake number 7, neglecting schema updates with site changes. Structured data should always reflect the current content of the page. Failing to update schema when content changes, such as adjusting prices or updating product descriptions, can lead to discrepancies that affect your SEO. Now, we touched upon this in the last video when we were mentioning things like, don't add 65-page schema templates for local business on your homepage, where 63 of those 65 pages are made up awards and accolades and different types of uh, uh, associations and things that the company doesn't have any relation to and doesn't, it's just completely fabricated. That's a very good way to really screw up your entity. And I've experienced it firsthand by testing that type of implementation. Absolute nightmare and a really stupid thing to do, to be honest. Don't do that. So the real world consequence of this is, for example, if you have a product schema with outdated pricing information, Google might flag it as misleading, or users might get frustrated by inaccurate information, leading to a poor user experience. Now, in some cases with e-commerce, um, there will be there's often a function where product schema can be dynamically updated. So pricing information isn't necessarily always an issue, the in stock, out of stock issue like that. But it's always something to be aware of and keep on top of for sure. So the impact, well, these inconsistencies can trigger warnings, errors, or even penalties. Google prioritizes accurate and reliable data, so outdated schema can reduce your chances of appearing in rich results, or in severe cases, result in penalties. The solution: create a process to review and update structured data every time you make significant content changes on the site. This can be incorporated into your regular content update. Sorry. It can be incorporated into your regular content update workflow, ensuring your schema stays accurate and reliable. So it's just one of those things that should be part of your regular activity, part of your regular QA review, and just part of the regular workflow that you would normally be doing on a monthly basis. All right, so here's an example. Here's a very simple product schema with a high quality blender as the product. The price is $99.99 and availability is in stock. Here's the update. So for instance, when the product price changes from $99.99 to $89.99, the schema markup is updated to match. This avoids inconsistencies that could mislead users and prevent penalties or warnings from search engines. Not so much the penalties or warnings where you would actually experience some sort of messaging, but algorithmically, you could certainly notice something. So mistake number 8, misuse of custom or uncommon properties. So remember, I said let's add a couple of asterisks to that because there are ways to make this work, and I'm going to share a very specific way to do that. That is one of the things that can separate, oh, schema doesn't work versus schema does work. But we're being very precise and careful in our implementation. So this will be on an upcoming video, and I think you're going to like that quite a bit. So it's tempting to add custom properties to make schema markup appear more detailed or unique. However, custom properties that aren't widely supported by search engines are often ignored or may even cause validation errors. So again, there is a right way to do this. There's a right way to choose those categories. Think of things like GBP categories and entities. Um, yeah, I think that's all I'm going to say on that until we get to the next video. So risks of non-standard properties. Some SEO practitioners use uncommon or experimental schema properties, hoping to get an edge. So what they're referring to here is really replacing that core definition. So let's say local business, replacing that with something that is not recognized by schema.org and will generally generate a warning. That's something you don't want to do. Um, like I said, there's ways to integrate multi-variable categories, which I will share with you. So keep in mind, while customization can occasionally help, it often results in unsupported data, which Google may disregard, wasting your efforts. Now that, again, is referring to the specific situation that I'll show you. Okay. So the SEO impact of doing this incorrectly is custom properties can lead to warnings or errors, especially if search engines don't recognize them. This may harm your structured data quality and reduce the page's chances of being selected for rich snippets. The solution: stick to schema.org's standard properties whenever possible. There's another caveat to that, which again, we'll go into later. If you're considering custom properties, first check if Google or other search engines support them. You can experiment, but prioritize recognized properties to ensure compatibility and avoid errors. Now, especially if you're new and this is something that you're just getting into, this will keep you out of a lot of trouble. As your experience and knowledge expands, then that's where the experimentation and understanding how to implement this in a more advanced way comes into play. So here's an example where we have a product schema, but instead we've substituted this word, custom rating. So we've inserted custom rating, okay? Where it should have actually have been aggregate rating, okay? So by switching from an unsupported custom property custom rating to the standard aggregate rating, we align with schema.org's guidelines. The aggregate rating property is recognized by search engines, allowing this data to be utilized in rich results. Now, again, remember when I was talking earlier in one of our first videos about keeping up to date on the criteria. So Google developers, schema.org, understanding what is current and what has changed. One thing that has changed in the last while was the ability and areas that you can utilize things like reviews and ratings. So just be aware of those types of things. But as it pertains to a product, that's still very valid. So mistake number 9, improper nesting and hierarchy of schemas. Now, this one is very, very common, especially if you're doing if you're hand coding schema. Um, we see this quite repetitively, quite frequently when there's blocks of schema that don't necessarily belong together or they're in the wrong place. This is where you can get errors in the validator that say that there's a duplicate key, things like that. So schema types often rely on correct nesting to indicate relationships between different entities. For instance, a review schema should be nested within a product schema. An FAQ schema can be nested within a service schema for specific queries, for example. So misinterpretation risks. When schemas are improperly nested, search engines may misinterpret the intended relationships. For instance, if you nest a review schema incorrectly, Google may fail to recognize it as part of the product, which could mean you miss out on valuable review-based rich snippets. Okay. SEO impact: improperly nested schemas can lead to warnings and errors, reducing the effectiveness of your structured data and preventing it from being utilized in rich snippets. In severe cases, misinterpretation can negatively impact search relevance. The solution is use tools like Schema Markup Validator and JSON-LD Playground to validate your nesting and hierarchy. So we looked at that in an earlier video with the markup validator, the two sides, that plus the rich results test. Both of those are very valid to be checking your code. And visualize the schema structure to ensure you're accurately representing relationships. And consult schema.org's guidelines for example of proper nesting. Or join our mastermind, which I will mention right now we have some pretty awesome Black Friday deals going on, Entity Elevation. So here's an example of an improperly nested and structured product piece here. So we've got product, we have review rating, we have review rating down here again. Okay. What it should look like is product, aggregate rating, review rating, review body. This is how it should look rather than this situation, as one example. So we correctly nest the aggregate rating as an aggregate rating for the product, and individual reviews are nested under review. Okay? So the reviews are under review. The aggregate rating, the rating value, the review count is properly assigned within the same product hierarchy. Okay? This ensures that each rating is associated with the correct level of data, product versus individual review. Okay, last one. Thanks for hanging on. I know this is a longer video, but we had a lot to cover. Mistake number 10, ignoring structured data quality, testing, and optimization. Big one that a lot of people are guilty of. Even myself, you get busy with stuff. You don't often get as much time for testing, but it's very important. Many site owners add schema markup once and forget about it. But regular testing and optimization are crucial for catching issues early and improving schema quality. So this is, situations where there might be a Google algorithmic update that casts less favor upon certain focal points that your schema might be trying to draw attention to, or it can be as simple as a best practice change. And we've seen this with things that have been updated in Google Developers. We've seen that on schema.org. We've even seen it on schema.org where there is a section of proposed changes, which are often adopted early before they're considered official. Things like that. Those are more like the experimental sort of beta changes, but often they are fully recognized. So common errors missed, testing tools like Google's Rich Result Test, the schema.org validator, and other structured data checkers can identify issues like missing fields, syntax errors, or deprecated properties that could hinder your schema's effectiveness. So the SEO impact, well, low quality or error-laden schema can prevent search engines from displaying rich snippets, and schema issues that go unchecked for too long can damage your site's credibility with search engines. That's why you need to know what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how to do it as effectively and efficiently as possible. The solution: schedule regular schema audits, just like you would with content and other types of things in your checklist, including things like titles, metas, alt tags. Schema should be one of those pieces that makes it into your regular QA review per se, and use multiple testing tools to catch a broad range of issues and optimize your schema based on recommendations. Consistent quality testing can help ensure your schema is effective and up to date. So here's an example. See if you can catch that there's a specific error in this template. See if you can catch it. Okay. So we have product, we have the product name, price, the aggregate rating, the rating value. What do you think is wrong here? Well, there's a couple things. So number one, there was a comma missing at the end of aggregate rating, and review count was missing. So whenever you have a rating value, you should also have a review count to tell Google what the total amount of reviews are for this product. You can also indicate a minimum value and a maximum value. So let's say that the scale goes from 1.0 to 5.0. You can also indicate that as well. But in this case, the corrected schema fixes a syntax error, so missing comment after aggregate rating, and adds review count for better data quality. So regularly testing schema with tools like the Google Rich Results Test ensures syntax and quality issues are caught early. Now, keep in mind that if you were to try to publish this without this comma, very likely you would have generated an error. So that would have had to have been fixed regardless before this would have even had passed validation. But just stuff to keep in mind, especially if you are, one of the things I recommend you don't do is use tools like Word or Notepad to make your edits, especially if you're making multiple edits before you go back to the validator. I like to do all of my edits in the validator and revalidate after every single change. And then I copy and I paste it into the master file that then gets saved. That process has worked well for me because then you catch any issues immediately without having to understand, okay, I made 4 changes. Which one of these 4 caused the issue? So the corrected schema, like I said, fixes these errors. You know, we had this comma issue we had here, and by checking these things regularly, you will naturally improve your data quality. You'll also start to understand and get used to seeing these types of issues. That's where, folks have told me, oh, I just can't stand looking at code. I can't look at it. Trust me, the longer that you do, the more you practice, the more you'll just see these things very, very quickly. And you'll be much more comfortable with being able to understand this type of code. And it's a good skill set to understand because it's so powerful. So that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much. Please subscribe, and I will have another video for you real soon. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.